"You're lying, that isn't your signature," she spat, hands tight on the folder. The overhead fluorescent hummed, sharp in the silence. His pulse hammered, but he held her stare. "Prove it, show them all." Papers slid across the table, the heavy velvet of a courtroom stifling every sound. The woman beside her flinched. "You said no one else saw." "But someone did." His voice cracked, fists balled, knuckles white. "He has nothing," she hissed, but her words wobbled. "Please," the other man in the room whispered, "just tell the truth." She shook her head, jaw ticking. "We're done talking." He leaned forward, eyes ablaze. "We're just getting started." How did it come to this? To understand, you have to go back to the day he lost everything and the phone call that started it all. The hallway reeked of boiled cabbage and forgotten dreams. Will Riley balanced a dented duffel and a cardboard box as the apartment manager locked his door for the last time. The echo of tumblers snapping shut felt like a final insult. Will didn't say goodbye, nobody left to hear it anyway. He checked his phone, $42.13 in his checking account. His thumb hovered over the call log. There was only one missed call, the number for a probate clerk in Austin blinking back at him. He crammed the phone in his pocket and slumped against the hallway wall, inertia pressing him down. Months had blurred past since Deb died. Sometimes her voice seemed to echo in late-night static, saying his name with that wry, matter-of-fact warmth. None of that mattered, the world had kept turning. Will had not. Last week Marlene, his stepmother of 2 years, issued from a world of synthetic florals and legal pads, showed up waving a will with more signatures than sense. Everything, she said, transferred to her, the medical practice in Amarillo, whatever was left of his father's portfolio, and yes, the rundown family cabin 3 states away. Marlene's voice had been butterknife gentle as she patted his shoulder. "The cabin in Maine, honey, that's all that's left. It's a lot of taxes, but maybe you can salvage something. I'm doing you a favor, really. It needs work." The lawyer's later call echoed that assessment. A rotten albatross will, some collapsed mansion on Chestnut Hill, Boston, 40 years unpaid taxes. The only thing your father didn't dump. Unless you enjoy the sound of possums in the attic, I'd let it go. Hook 1 appeared as Will shifted the box to his hip and heard something slide and clink inside. Letters, no, not just letters. A flash of red wax, a brass key, and a faded Polaroid with his father grinning beside a deer mount, date scrawled, 82. He turned the Polaroid over. The handwritten script read, "In the end, only what's hidden remains." Dr. That message cut through the fog in Will's mind. If you've ever seen your life shrink to $42 and a box of secrets, and wondered whether the world is giving you one final puzzle or just spitting you out, keep listening. 4 days later, Will's pickup rattled through dust devils curling off the Texas blacktop. The radio didn't work. The passenger seat held an old thermos, a battered duffel, and a single envelope marked Chestnut, open only when desperate. He thought of everything left behind. The apartment, Deb's record player, phone numbers erased from his life with a tap. Leaning back, he squinted into the sun, remembering flashes. His father's meticulous hands tying flies on the porch in Maine, Marlene's perfumes clouding even funerals, her brittle smile always a shade too wide. The drive through Amarillo's outskirts was nearly silent, save for the engine's uneven cough. He replayed Marlene's phone call 100 times, her crisp words, "I'm sorry, Will, it's all gone. Your father wanted me to keep the legacy together, but really, you're better off." His old therapist's words rang back. Grief isn't just about losing someone, it's losing what you thought your place would be. Maybe the world was offering him a new one if he could stand picking through rot and mold to find it. At last the Parker estate appeared, looming behind iron gates hung askew. The house looked flayed, its clapboards curling, gables scabbed with birds' nests. Each window was blind with dust. The place reeked of dead leaves and mold, wind rattled loose bits of gutter. Standing in the sagging foyer, Will checked the Polaroid again. The deer mount in the photo had hung right here, above the spool-shaped dresser, its glass eyes flickering in the brittle morning light. Now only a cracked patch of lath stared back. A floorboard squeaked. He circled to the parlor, drawn by an unnameable urgency. The head there. Ornate antlers, yellowed felt snout, a shadowy cavity where time had hollowed bone. Heart thumping, Will slid his hand up beneath the bighorn skull's jaw. Cold metal grazed his fingers. He pulled a small brass key, identical to the one from his box in Texas and somehow heavier for it. He eyed the old-fashioned walnut dresser beneath. Drawers jammed, worn finish, stinking faintly of camphor. He worked the side panel, heart slamming against ribs. It clicked. A false bottom popped loose, dust mushrooming out. Inside waited faded bearer bonds, a stack of 20s rubber-banded tight, a manila folder thick with folded legal sheets marked private, and a single crumpled patent certificate, edges eaten by time. For an instant, no air moved. His father's script in blue ink crowned the top document, 4WR in case of betrayal. A truck roared past outside, wheels hissing on gravel. Will snapped the folder shut and sank onto the faded armchair, chest caving in. Upstairs, boards creaked with memories or maybe just rodents. He pressed both keys into his palm. There was more here than Marlene had ever guessed, or maybe she knew. He eyed the folder again. This was only the first crack in a wall about to give. The folder snapped open in his lap, the brittle air thick with camphor and secrets. Will's hand shook as he unfolded the patent certificate. The header read, Process 4 Low-Yield Plasma Catalyst, 1968. There, scrawled at the bottom, was his grandfather's name, Edwin Riley. The next page, a letter yellowed but written in the precise geometric hand Will remembered. He read aloud, voice wobbling, as if the dead man might answer. William, if you are reading this, then either your father has failed or someone has come for what was always meant to be ours. The patent I registered in 1968 is no longer safe. Beware anyone who claims this house is worthless. You must find the bearer papers, your stepmother. Trust her kindness at your risk. Shock crackled down Will's arms. The next page, a list of distribution contracts, numbers scrawled by hand except for a note at the end. U.S. Defense Contractor, Contact DENIED 1971, Monitor Developments but hide original. Will blinked. The bonds, over 50,000 face value, mostly from firms wound down decades ago, looked pristine. Someone had hidden serious assets, but this patent, combined with the cut-off letter, painted a deeper picture. Maybe the worthless property was just a smokescreen hiding something everyone had missed. A noise startled him. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He snatched it. Unknown number, no message. He stuffed everything back into the compartment, heart drumming, and turned for the parlor door. The wind outside sounded like a whisper through broken teeth. All at once, the magnitude of what he'd found hit him. If the military had stolen the patent, if Marlene had helped cover it up, then the battle was only beginning. He shouldered his duffel and bonds, stuffed the letter deep in his pocket, and pushed into sunlight. The sky stretched flat and glare-white, promising both exposure and the next move. The sash window in the next room groaned as it opened. Will turned at the noise to see a woman standing in the outer hall, Susan, the estate appraiser, clutching a clipboard with chipped scarlet nails. She eyed him up and down. Place is a tomb. You actually thinking about renovating this dump? Will met her gaze steady. Depends what might be buried with it. She snorted. Your stepmother called, said I ought to put my lowest estimate down. Funny, since it's not technically her signature on the release form, I need the original. He stilled, remembering the key, the Polaroid, the letter. What if there are documents in the house, unreleased assets? She shrugged. If you can show me anything real before Friday when I hand off my report, the state will have to run the numbers. But your stepmother's legal team isn't waiting around. He pressed the Polaroid into her hand. Look at this date. The deer mount, does it look moved? This is from '82. Someone's lying about what's been here. She frowned. You show me the original will or something to prove ownership lineage. I'll look at anything, but don't waste my time. As Susan left, Will's phone vibrated again. He answered on instinct. Is this Will Riley? A man's voice crackled. Speaking. You don't know me, but my name's Eric Barnes. I worked with your father. Meet me tonight by the Amarillo Old Plaza where the drive-in used to be. I have proof your stepmother's got more to hide than that will, and if you don't show, you'll wish you had. The line went dead. Will's head swam. Stakes had just doubled. He was running on fumes, but now the world was hunting him for answers he never asked for. The night air bit as Will stood by the crumbling marquee of the Amarillo Plaza. Wind sang over broken asphalt, swirling debris around his boots. His grip on the duffel tightened as an aging white sedan braked nearby. A balding man emerged, flannel jacket zipped to his chin. He lifted a heavy envelope. Glad you came, he said, voice clipped. I've been watching Marlene for months. She's got a partner, Franklin Keller. Owns half the defense consulting firm that retrofitted your grandfather's patent into weaponized plasma devices. The money was supposed to seed a scholarship fund in Boston. Never got there. Will blinked. You talking about the grants my dad planned? Eric nodded. His will mentioned an educational endowment in his father's name, right? Marlene's got a forged copy she's been feeding the lawyer. The partners, she cut them in, funneled the real assets into offshore shells. Why tell me now? Eric looked away. Because Franklin found out she falsified more than your dad's signature. He's ready to flip. Meet me at his office tomorrow at noon, and bring whatever you dug up in that house. A band of thunderheads smudged the horizon, flattening the city's glow. Will thanked him and left, the weight of obligation biting deeper now. By the next afternoon, Will found himself in a glassy downtown Amarillo office. Franklin Keller, red-eyed, leaned over a cluttered desk while Eric perched, silent, on a tattered armchair. Folders were fanned out like accusations. Franklin's hands fidgeted, knuckles cracked raw. Your stepmother thinks she's smarter than everyone, but she got sloppy. She never expected your father's original to surface. If those bonds, if that patent, are what I think they are, we're talking millions. Eric nodded. She's lined up this appraiser to lowball the whole sale, pocket the remainder. But the scholarship, she's going to let it lapse like it never existed. Will laid the patent and bearer bonds on the desk. My grandfather warned about betrayal. He said to trust her at my own risk. Franklin sorted the documents, lips tight. I'll make a deal, Will. Immunity for me, I testify, give every email, every offshore transfer she authorized, you get the rest. But if I go down for this, I'll shred everything. Will stared him down, willpower consolidating into something steely. You have 24 hours, help or get out of my way. Franklin pushed a thumb drive across the desk. Every password, every bank detail. This is your hammer, Will, use it right. Susan, the appraiser, called at midnight. Listen, I was threatened by someone on her legal team. They want my report tomorrow. I'll stall if you can get me real proof she cooked the books. You have less than 18 hours. Will hung up, mind racing, a plan forming sharp as broken glass. The time for running was over. Early the next morning, Will returned to Chestnut Hill, documents and passwords in hand. The legal team was already there, slick men in pressed collars, Marlene radiant in a champagne linen suit. She turned, cooing softly. Will, I hoped you'd be here, at least for closure. He opened his mouth to reply, but Susan intercepted, voice tight. Mr. Riley, did you obtain the documents I requested? He nodded, passing her the key evidence. It's all here. Marlene's smile wavered. Let's not drag this out, we all want what's best. Susan flipped through the folder, eyes widening as she read. Franklin shuffled nervously, Eric beside him paler than ever. Will's rage simmered, but his words were deliberate. Susan, would you mind reading the letter aloud? She adjusted her glasses, cleared her throat. William, if you are reading this, then either your father has failed or someone has come for what was always meant to be ours. The patent I registered in 1968 is no longer safe. Beware anyone who claims this house is worthless. You must find the bearer papers, your stepmother, trust her kindness at your risk." Marlene scoffed, voice brittle. "That's nothing but a paranoid old man's scribble." Will's hands tightened on the table edge. "You forged my father's signature, Marlene. You lied to every lawyer and stole every cent meant for the endowment." She laughed brittle. "And who would believe you? You brought nothing to this family but shame and debt." Franklin coughed, shifting. "Marlene, She glared. "Don't you start. You lose everything too if this comes out." Eric raised his hand, voice cracking. "She had me doctor the digital records. Everything can be traced, and I can prove you signed those transfers after Robert died." Marlene's face drained. "Eric, if you know what's good for you, you'll." He shook his head, voice trembling. "I'm tired, Marlene, tired of hurting people for you." The legal team's senior partner spoke sharply. "I'm going to ask everyone to step outside while we call the authorities." Marlene advanced, eyes wild now, manicured fingers curled over the folder. Will stood his ground, defiance flaring. "You're lying, that isn't your signature," she spat, hands tight on the folder. His breath hitched, remembering Deb's laughter, the warmth of belonging, all yanked away by this woman's greed. But he steadied, voice clear. "Prove it, show them all." Papers slid across the table, friction shattering the hush. One of the attorneys flipped each to the light, eyes narrowing. "Ma'am, this ink, this is less than 6 months old. The original was dry for years." Marlene's lips parted. "You said no one else saw." Franklin's voice, small but resolute. "But someone did. You had me notarize everything. I have the logs, the dates, the transfers, all of it." Marlene turned to glare at him. "He has nothing." "Please," Eric whispered, looking to Will. "Just tell the truth." She shook her head, jaw ticking. "We're done talking." He leaned forward, eyes ablaze. "We're just getting started." The room seemed to contract, every eye on the tableau, Susan's shocked stare, Franklin's relief, Marlene's collapse. Footsteps thundered in the outer hall. Police in blue blazers appeared, badges flashing like verdicts. Marlene dropped into the nearest chair as officers advanced. One read her rights aloud, another guided Franklin gently aside. Susan snapped photos of every document. The legal team murmured, astonished. Eric slumped, a bundle of guilt and relief. Outside, the wind battered the blackened windows, carrying the echo of Will's father's voice. "Only what's hidden remains." Marlene's fate was swift. She faced indictment on fraud, wire transfer forgery, grand larceny, and conspiracy. Franklin's detailed logs and Eric's testimony ensuring her conviction. The news broke in every Boston and Amarillo paper. Medical spouse indicted in multi-million-dollar embezzlement, scholarship restored. Franklin's agreement with prosecutors gave him a reduced sentence, but he lost all business holdings. He made a statement, trembling, "I should have spoken up long ago. I hope whatever good comes next makes up for what's lost." Eric clung to his deal, testimony and full evidence in exchange for immunity. He left town. Rumor had it he started volunteer work with local youth suicide prevention in a quiet Texas suburb. The scholarship fund Marlene tried to bury became Will's mission. It launched that autumn in his grandfather's name, awarding first-generation college students in the Texas Panhandle and Boston. Will stood next to Susan at the dedication ceremony, plaque newly hung beneath the restored Bighorn Mount. She elbowed him. "You're not as unlucky as you think," she teased. "Just stubborn." He grinned, a laugh finally breaking the old shell. "Stubborn keeps you alive." The press took photos, police and school officials shook hands. Eric sent a letter from his small town, 2 towns over. "Glad you saw it through, Will, it mattered." Later, standing at the mansion's cracked window, Will traced the outlines of empty rooms now echoing with memory but not regret. He carried no debt, financial or otherwise, only responsibility and a sense that, for once, no one could steal the next step. Some inherit history, some inherit pain. All Will inherited was the fight to see right done. And if you've ever wondered whether what's lost can be built anew, remember, What survives is what was taken, but what you choose to leave behind for someone else. The most enduring gifts are those nobody can squander. As dusk settled over Chestnut Hill, both the man and the house looked ready for more light. A week after the ceremony, Will sat at a worn desk by the bay window, a mug of coffee cooling as autumn mist crawled across the Parker estate lawn. The house was quieter than it had ever been, no lawyer's shoes clicking, no voices bristling behind doors, just the pantry ticking and a starling tapping the glass as if to say, "Well." A steady knock cut through his reverie. He opened the front door to find Susan balancing a stack of folders, scarf whipping in the wind. "Can I come in, or am I consigned to the porch like a vacuum salesman?" He grinned, stepping back. "Depends if you're here to sell cleaning services or just to criticize my coffee." She set the folders on the table, brushing leaves from her sleeves. "Neither. I brought what the school board returned, the first round of thank you notes, and something else." Her gaze flickered, cautious. He pulled the chair for her. "What?" She slid a sealed envelope across the table. "From your late father's Boston attorney, delivered by hand this morning, said it was supposed to go to Marlene if she was proven innocent. Clearly, that didn't happen, but there's a codicil naming the alternate beneficiary, you." Will rested a hand over the envelope. "Anything good?" She shrugged. "If you like antique paperwork and legalese." He swallowed, breaking the seal. Inside lay a single sheet. He skimmed the typewritten lines, then slowed as he reached the ending. "Should my estate ever, through error or malice, bypass my son, the attached insurance policies and all proceeds from the Parker house's intellectual property revert to his trust. No executor may override this directive. Please notify the scholarship board immediately." A single check fluttered free, a sum far larger than he expected, nearly doubling the scholarship's seed fund. Will set it down, feeling the centuries of weight in that moment. Susan let out a low whistle. "You must have been very good in a previous life." He laughed, nerves firing oddly. "Or maybe I've just paid off every debt in this one." She rolled her eyes but smiled. "Either way, the endowment's secure through at least a decade of grants. Kids will be reading your grandfather's name for a long time." He traced the edges of the patent and the old letter, which he'd pressed into a cheap frame and propped by the window. "They should read more than my grandfather's name," he said quietly. "They should know who tried to steal it all away and who stood for them instead." Outside, the wind carried the faint noise of children's laughter from the playground down the hill, a new sound for the estate, and one that made Will's chest ache in a different, hopeful way. He looked to Susan. "You sticking around, or does the next haunted house call?" She tilted her head playfully. "Depends. Do you still need someone to explain tax liens and rot repair, or did you figure it all out in one heroic swoop?" He shook his head, "Not even close." Her smile warmed. "Then I'm staying a little longer." By mid-November, the estate was changed. The walls had been washed, the parlor's musty curtains replaced, and the smell of mold replaced by cinnamon and sunlight. Local kids came by after school, sometimes to study under the plaque, sometimes to help Will bury narcissus bulbs under the old elms. Franklin, newly paroled, wrote a letter, a remorseful, handwritten apology. "I wish I'd had your backbone, Will. The world's full of people like Marlene, but there's always a choice." Included was a faded photograph of Franklin and Will's father fishing, the river curling behind them in autumn gold, and a note, "Remember what you build, not just what you lose." Eric's updates turned infrequent, but every letter was positive. "Working with these kids reminds me of what matters," he wrote, "and that everyone deserves a second start, even if they never get the first right." On Thanksgiving, Susan brought homemade pie and a friend who knew carpentry. Will's foster dog chased squirrels across the empty drive, and the scholarship's first recipient, a shy sophomore named Terrence, stopped by to say thank you, clutching a composition notebook. He seemed awestruck by the house, whispering, "My grandmother remembers walking past here when she was a kid. She said it was cursed." Susan nudged Will. See, not unlucky, legendary. Will, red-faced, waved Terence in. It's not cursed, just overdue for better luck. After dessert, while sunlight bled out behind the hills, Susan lingered as others left. She traced her thumb along the mantel, glancing at him with the cautious fondness that only grows from long, hard-fought trust. What will you do, now that you've saved the world from villainous stepmothers? He looked at the rows of empty rooms, thinking of how far he'd come from the Texas apartment, the way loss had given way, grudgingly, to something made, not inherited. Keep building, he answered. There's room enough here for what's new, for whoever needs it. And for you. He regarded her unruly hair, the laugh lines at her eyes. For me too, maybe, finally. They stood quietly together, the world outside full of wind and coming snow, and for the first time in years Will Riley felt not lost, but chosen. In the slow-glow days between Thanksgiving and Christmas, the house transformed one step at a time. Each Friday, Will hosted open hours for anyone with questions about the scholarship or the odd history of the place. Sometimes he told the true story. Sometimes he let the neighborhood kids build outlandish theories about hidden treasure and secret passages. One evening, as new snow sifted against the window panes, Will found Susan rehanging the deer mount in the front hall. She looked up at him, mock serious. I think this guy should watch over things a while longer, remind you that luck is less about what's given than what you fight to keep. He helped her steady the skull. You know, for years I ran from anything that felt like history. Now I'm, restoring it one hole at a time. History's only heavy until you set it down, she replied, dusting her hands, or pass it forward. He smiled, you making a habit of saving lost causes. Only when they make decent coffee. They both laughed easy, true. He realized then what had changed, the difference between being left behind and choosing, deliberately, stubbornly, to stay. He made a promise to himself, standing in the dappled afternoon with light streaming through the leaded glass, to never again let silence mean surrender, to keep moving forward without erasing the past that brought him here. A few days before Christmas, an envelope postmarked with foreign stamps arrived. Will slid it open, a grin spreading as he read Eric's looping scrawl. Heard the house is back in the right hands. You beat them all, Will. Happy holidays. Remember, what's hidden remains, but what's given away, that's what lasts. On New Year's Eve, a light snow fell. The house was finally full. Terence and his family, a half-dozen other grant recipients, Susan, and 2 dogs tucked under the sideboard, all ringed around the fire. The walls, once echoing only with loss, hummed with laughter and possibility. Will watched the room and thought of Deb, of his father tying flies on the porch, of the way even the hardest legacies might become gifts if you refuse to let them be ruined. He raised his glass for a toast, his voice finally sure. To new beginnings, to truth over greed, and to building what outlasts us all. The group cheered, faces glowing in the cheerful lamplight. For the first time, Will felt the old wounds closing over, something new growing in their place. As midnight bells chimed faintly from the distant church, Will pressed his hand to the window. The landscape shimmered, cold and bright, and in the empty spaces of the house and his heart, the future waited, uncertain, unsquandered, ready to be made. And if you ever wonder, standing among what's ruined and what's yet to be, whether what's hidden can outlast what's stolen, remember Will Riley, proof that only what's truly given endures. The past, for all its betrayals, was at last at rest, and the promise of everything ahead glowed, for the first time, unbroken. Spring rose fast. By March, green shoots fought through the beds by the porch, and sunlight angled warmer each week across the patched floors. The Parker estate, once an empty relic, slowly filled with signs of life. Books stacked in impossible places, muddy sneakers by the door, laughter on the wind, and a ritual of coffee mugs left to gather rings on the kitchen table. Even Susan's scarf, striped and improbable, hung next to Will's worn jacket on the new coat rack. A year had almost passed since the storm of accusations and revelations, but the old hurts felt distant now, half drowned by good work and new routines. The scholarship doubled its impact, 3 new grants going out this month alone. Terrence came often, more confident now, even helping Will lay a path out to the water pump, sleeves rolled high, stories flying. One evening found Will on the porch steps, watching dusk smooth the rolling lawns to velvet. Susan brought out 2 plates, still warm from the oven. She nudged his side, easing down beside him. "You realize you could sell this house tomorrow and live easy anywhere," she teased. "Buy a 1-room loft in Austin, never sand another floorboard in your life." He smiled, bumping her shoulder. "And who'd be here to check my wiring didn't set the roof on fire? No, this place, it's stubborn as I am." Susan studied him, the last light tracing her cheekbones. "You make it look easy, starting over in the ruins of somebody else's mess." "Never easy," he hesitated, a memory of Deb's voice flickering in the blue dusk. "But for the first time, I'm glad I didn't let go." She reached for his hand. "You made something no one can take, Will, not Marlene or Franklin or anyone chasing someone else's fortune." Her tone softened. "And you did it honest, which is something I don't see enough." He squeezed her fingers, uncertain and sure both at once. "I couldn't have without help." They sat in silence, comfort blooming between them. A car pulled up, the next scholarship candidate, a nervous young woman with a folder clutched to her chest, parents in tow. Will straightened, bracing himself the old way, then relaxed as Susan's laughter broke the spell. "Legendary, remember," she whispered. He nodded, smile spreading. "Not cursed, just overdue." Inside, the house was alive with voices, the smell of cinnamon and old wood. The echoes of history turned outward, not inward. By midnight, the last guest was gone. Susan lingered at the door, scarf loose around her neck. She turned, expectancy in her gaze, coming back in. He hesitated, 1,000 choices hovering, and then followed, pulled by warmth, by hope, by the belief that some homes are made, not found. Later he wrote a letter, not to anyone, just to himself, a promise and a benediction. Tomorrow he'd weed the beds, order new books, call home the kids who needed second chances. The past would stay in its place, no longer ruling him. The house, at last, was not a tomb but a beginning. On the kitchen table, the folder marked private rested beside a vase of bright tulips. Its secrets were spent, its history transformed. Outside, the wind carried a sound half like memory, half like possibility. Will Riley smiled. He had finally learned the oldest lesson: nothing worth having survives unless you give it away. And somewhere far past the ruined places in all their hearts, spring began anew.